I'm just going to be real. In fact, candor is sort of going to be the word of the morning. I'm going to be very candid with you first by telling you that I want to have this conversation with you about like I want a root canal. The the challenge of preparing to preach Ephesians 1 and to have this conversation the same morning has been difficult for me. One is so high and lofty and glorious, and this is just what I've got to talk to you about. It's hard, but I just don't think I'm a faithful shepherd if I don't talk to you about it and talk to you with incredible honesty and candor, because we need to have this. We cannot pretend there's not a problem, and that there's a problem. Not in just some segments of society or some segments of the church or some churches. This isn't a problem that liberals have and conservatives don't. This isn't a problem that that Episcopalians have but Baptists don't. It's not a problem that kids have and adults don't. It's no longer a problem that men have that women don't. All that has changed with the massive availability of pornography and the absolute onslaught in every aspect of our society. Tanya recently, she one of the great joys of menopause is not there are a lot of them. I'll tell you, there are a lot of. She's not been sleeping well. I better tell all this stuff before she gets here, but. She's not been sleeping well, so she's been trying different, sleep natural things. And so we were at, Sam's or Costco's, one of those places where you buy stuff you don't need in larger quantities than you could ever consume. And they had some kind of a sleep aid that was like gummy bears. Have you seen this? And so it's got melatonin and something else in it, I think. And she thought, well, maybe this will help me. And so she bought it, and of course in this 8-gallon jug, and took one the other night, and it gave her an awful night. It was terrible. She woke up, she's had like bad dreams. She had terrible thoughts. It put her in this like depression. It sort of hung on. Gave her like a hangover during the day, and she said, "That's terrible. I can't have that." And I said, "Well, you need to just throw the thing completely away. We can't have that in our house, because if our grandchildren see gummy bears, what are they going to want? They're going to want to eat gummy bears. And you and I know that however that's packaged, it's not good for them. It will hurt them. It is destructive." So we take care with our children and our grandchildren about things like medicines. We have bottles that they can't open. We have we put our guns in a safe and locks on our guns so that children can't get to that. We take great care to protect them. You came here to church today. You see we've got security here. We got cameras around. You have to sign your kid in to our children's department, sign them out. Why do we do all this? Because we want to have security around here. We take security seriously. So why would we go to all that trouble? And then we just don't in any way take care of what they're looking at, what is influencing them, what is teaching them about male-female relationships and sexuality. So I want to talk to you just about really ways that I think Satan is attacking the family. We've seen a radical moral shift in this country over the past 20 years. And I think it is directly tied. I don't think it's indirect at all. It is directly tied to the availability of pornography. Attitudes have changed about sexuality, about things like gay marriage. You think about it, 2004, Kentucky passes a constitutional amendment saying Here's the definition of marriage. That seems like ages ago, doesn't it? One wonders, I mean, of course, we would all lament that really it ended up having nothing to do with the will of the majority, but I also have to believe that I'm not sure that an amendment like that could pass today, just 14 years later, because attitudes have changed so radically. And what's the difference? I've told these stories before, but I want you to hear me. I want to tell them again because I want to drive this home. So 21 years ago, when Tanya started teaching in the seminary wives class at Southern Seminary, you know, at the next to last class, she always lets these seminary wives, and she teaches the marriage and family class, and so she lets the seminary wives ask questions that she will then answer in the last class period. So 21 years ago, for the first 10, 12 years that she taught, she could count on the majority of the questions in there, or about, not the majority, but the one question was asked more than any other. And it was probably 25, 30% of the questions submitted were of what I call the frisky seminary student question. And it was a wife saying, my husband wants to have sex all the time. That's all he wants. So how can I either tone him down or rise to his level of desire? How can we get this balanced? And Tanya would answer the question. She would talk to him and give him strategies and things and ways to think and pray. And that was the question she had to answer. About 5 years ago, that completely changed. And now, 75% of the questions submitted by the wives of seminary students is, my husband never wants to have sex. What can I do to get him interested? Now, these aren't sleazy guys. These are guys that are committed to ministry. They're saved. They feel called to serve the Lord in pastoring or missions or teaching in a seminary, and yet they're not having sex with their wives. I mean, these are guys in their 20s. And so we know only one thing's changed in that time, and that's the availability of pornography. So I'm going to reference a few things that we're going to send to you via email, some links. I'm going to tell you right now, some of them are offensive. If you want to opt out of that, then you let Scott know you don't want to receive this. But I'm encouraging you to receive it. I want you to look at these things. I want you to see it for yourself. We're not sending you pornography. We're sending you studies and articles that talk candidly and use terms that I will not use here in this class and on video today. So one of the things I want you to watch is a TED Talk on YouTube called The Great Porn Experiment by Gary Wilson. And in it, he talks about what happens when, especially when a man looks at pornography. You see, our brains are designed to desire pleasure. I mean, you know, you got Maslow's hierarchy of pleasure. This is one of the things that motivates us. And pleasure is not a bad thing. Pleasure is a good thing. It does motivate us. We all want the pleasure of a happy home and the pleasure of having children. Those are good things. Pleasure is not inherently bad or sinful in any way. But what we want to understand is that the pleasure has to be held within the boundaries that God has established. And of course, even a good thing can become a bad thing if it becomes the only thing. You know, if all I did was witness to people, and that's a good thing, but if I did that to the exclusion of parenting my children and preparing sermons, I'd be out of balance. Even with a great thing like that, I can do a good thing to excess and it become a bad thing. And so the drive to pleasure is an important human desire, but if we take even a good thing, we take it outside of the boundaries God has established, or if we do it to excess, it becomes a problem. Well, this is exactly what happens. We have a chemical in our brain called dopamine, and the thing about internet pornography, it's not like pornography in the past. So when I was a kid, for me, pornography was discovering the Playboys in my neighbor's garage. And a Playboy magazine for a teenage boy certainly has an allure. And you look at that, and it's got however many pictures a Playboy magazine might have in it of these naked women, and it is thrilling to a 14-year-old's brain. You see that, but then the magazine's over. You can look at it again, but you don't have a constant novelty. And there's not a dopamine rush because there's not something you're doing that is then feeding you more and novel images. And here's the thing about internet pornography is that it is very much akin to a slot machine. And that is that, by clicking this thing, it gives you a new rush of dopamine because you see something new, you see something different, you see something novel. And as soon as that's over, you can click again, and they give you links on that page, and you can keep clicking. And so what happens is that people become addicted to pornography. And especially the way this works is then your brain moves from being sort of soft-wired for this to being rather hardwired for it. Now you've got to have it. You really have become addicted to that dopamine rush. And in fact, it becomes so addicting that a man will become impotent. Now I just got to stop and say, if you don't see Satan's strategy there, I mean, how he must laugh at us. Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 2, I believe it is, he's telling them to forgive the guy that they've excommunicated, and he says, well, if you forgive him, I forgive him. And he talks about an unforgiving spirit being a tool of Satan. And then he says this, he says, because we're not ignorant of Satan's devices. Unfortunately, I think we are ignorant of Satan's devices. I think we have failed to see what a device of Satan this is, that by holding out to us this fake thrill. You hear a lot about fake news. Well, I'm telling you, pornography is a fake thrill. It's not real. It's a chemical rush, but there's no intimacy there. There's no joy there. There's no growing old together. There's no comfort and encouragement and service and serving and being served and joy and delight. All you get is the simple chemical injection of a dopamine rush, and that's it. That's what you get. And in fact, the more you get it, the more it cuts off your ability to enjoy the other things, the real things. In fact, especially in a young male brain, a young man will, you get sort of the easiest way to picture it is like it's digging trenches. Because a young man's brain has a high degree of neuroplasticity. Your brain's not through developing until, for a man, I want to say around 29, something like that. And so the more these neural pathways get this dopamine injection, the more a guy's got to have it. The more he does it, it's like digging ditches in his brain. It's carving out a road there, and he has to have that fulfilled. And in doing that, it cuts off his ability to function in a normal sexual way with a woman. And if the guy stops cold turkey, he says, okay, no, let's just put him in a room with no internet access, no books, no nothing. It will take him, on average, it takes a young man in his 20s 5 months to be able to function sexually again after he's been impotent because of internet, of pornography. And a man in his 50s, his brain doesn't have that degree of neuroplasticity. He'll still become impotent, but it'll take him about 2 months to get over that effect and be able to function sexually again. So when I hear a bunch of 20-something wives saying that their husbands never want to have sex, I've got one really strong suspicion that it's pornography. I was a trustee at the IMB, and when we interview candidates, we no longer ask Have you looked at pornography? We don't ask that question. You know what we ask? When was the last time? You need to know that this is practically 100%. So, it started years ago. You'd have these late night ads on for Girls Gone Wild and stuff like that, and DVDs and stuff, and suddenly that moved to the internet, and it was just an easy transition for people to make. And then there's a book out there. Seth, you remember the name of the book about when porn went free? Is it Butterfly Effect? Yeah, there's a book called The Butterfly Effect about what happened when they decided to make porn free. And I'm telling you, it was the game changer, and the detrimental effect in society and in our kids it's just been massive. You have no idea how much of my time is taken dealing with this issue in the lives of pastors and seminary students and church members and even other people's church members. It even stuns me. I get calls from other people and go to other churches in town, aren't comfortable talking to their pastor about why they're comfortable talking to me about it. I do not know. I don't know how to take that. I'm not sure if that's a compliment or an insult. I don't know, but it happens a lot. It happens a lot, and it's become a huge problem. So let's talk about our kids. Now, I'm going to tell you that some of you are going to be really resistant to some of the things I'm saying, because here's the line of thinking. My kid's a good kid. My kid doesn't look at this stuff. My kid's a good kid. Listen to me. Your kid is a good kid, and your kid's looking at pornography. I'm comfortable enough to say it that way. I'm not saying might be. I'm saying that if your kid is around other kids, they're showing them stuff. If you have HBO in your home or some movie channel like that with the late night shows, and now, of course, if you have that on your cable, you can also get it on your phone, and you've got access to everything that they show. And look, your kids are much more tech savvy than you are. Trust me on that. They know how to use their iPhone and their iPad. They know how to get to stuff. You're using Snapchat and all this stuff that you're too busy to fool with and learn. But man, they're doing it, and their friends are doing it, and they show each other things. Sometimes when it's not wanted or asked for, they might be sent something. They might be shown something, and it's just very possible that even in saying to somebody else, "Oh, I don't want to see that. I don't do that," but then alone, I mean, your kid's human. Your child is human. Canadian researcher Simon Lejeunesse says most boys seek pornography by age 10. Most boys seek pornography by age 10. Now, what that simply means is they've got a natural curiosity about women, and if they have an opportunity, they may not. I'm not saying that they're addicted to it by age 10. I'm saying they're looking at it a lot by age 10. But I'm saying that by age 10, in this culture that shows them all these sexual images, they've got a desire to look at something that's there. That curiosity is there. And internet porn proves more compelling to users than any other pornographic materials because of its ubiquitous availability, its unending novelty. And so, see, that's what it appeals to. And this rewires the brain. And not only that, it's going to shape, here's why it's so dangerous, it's going to shape the way they see relationships with the opposite sex. A girl looking at internet pornography, what's her idea of sex going to be? I mean, just looking at internet pornography, are women treated with respect and kindness and tenderness? Let's just be real honest. That is not what you see on pornography. You see women being demeaned and hurt and treated roughly. And, I mean, the whole 50 Shades of Grey thing. I mean, here we are. If it weren't so tragic and sad, it would be funny to watch the way our culture is grappling with the Me Too movement at the same time they are insistent on upholding that there's no morality in sexuality. You can't have it both ways, but they're sure trying. You know, only a biblical sexual ethic addresses both of those things. But pornography is not going to do it. And yet, so if you read this New York Times article that we're going to give you a link to, it was in the Sunday Review just, I think, 4 weeks ago today. And it's what online porn is doing to your teenager. And it just describes what they're looking at. And the reporter interviews a bunch of kids and the way, especially boys, the way they think what women like and what women want. And they're sort of grappling with whether or not they would ask a woman for these particular sex acts or whether or not they would just do it. And they talk about the way in all the videos, women look like they're enjoying it. You know, women want this. And this is what's shaping them. And so in response to it, the great big takeaway of this article in the New York Times is that now they're giving classes. You ready for this? They're giving classes to teenagers in porn literacy. And the purpose of the class is not to tell kids to not look at porn. It's to tell them to be discerning and to make sure that they're not looking at porn that is violent or oppressive toward women. Yeah, good luck with that one. Right? And in that article, it just talks about, they ask kids, you know, how many times have you seen this particular sex act in which a man does a certain thing to a woman? And kids know all the names for these, by the way. There's, you know, sometimes I'm doing a web search for something totally unrelated that I don't even think is sexual, and something comes up, like I've hit on a term that I didn't even know existed. And, you know, I mean, things that sound innocent to us, like Netflix and chill. Netflix and chill sounds like, you know, Tanya and I are going to watch a movie and eat popcorn. You know what that means? It means have sex. So if you hear your teenagers going, yeah, we're going to Netflix and chill, you stop them right there. Because they mean something by it you don't mean. And there are all kinds of terms like this that they have names for all these sex acts, different body parts, different expressions of their sexuality. And all this is from the porn world. And, you know, just, so the most used porn site, which I will not give the name, lest anybody not know it and I be the guy who drives you there. But there's one particular website that's sort of the McDonald's franchise of porn. And they have, let's see, I wrote it down, how many, this past year, 2017, 28.5 billion visitors. Now, get those numbers. There's between 7 and 8 billion people on the earth. And last year they had 28.5 billion visitors to that website. That's 81 million per day. Per day. And it's not just lost people doing that, folks. Please understand that. We're struggling with this. They have enough data transferred in 2017 to fill up every iPhone in the world. Well, that was just their 2017 stats. Just so what are, a lot is revealed by the search terms. So they list, Forbes magazine had an article about this where they linked to this site's own annual report. And I will tell you, I'd never even heard, the number 2 search term I had never even heard of how ignorant I am. And the word is hentai, Hentai. And apparently it's basically sort of Japanese cartoon drawing of sex acts, something like that. I may not have that defined exactly correctly, but it's something in that category. And this has become the second largest search term. You know what numbers 4, 5, 6, and 7 are? Or 4, 5, and 6, rather. Stepmom, stepsister, and mom. Now, the 4th, 5th, and 6th highest search terms on that website that has more hits than any other porn site are incestual in nature. I'm just telling you, that says a lot. It says a lot. You know the story. We were in Hawaii recently when we got that missile alert. It was like 38 minutes, I think, until we got the all clear. So this website, the porn website that I'm referring to, they released their statistics in the state of Hawaii before, during, and after the missile alert. And they showed a graph. So here's like the normal usage. Now remember that we got the alert at 8-something in the morning. And so there's a fairly high usage. The alert comes out, let's say 8:03, it's something like 8:08, maybe something like that. And the porn usage goes way down. I mean, it goes into negative numbers for this website. And then as it lingers on, it begins to go slightly up. And at the moment that the all clear comes, it spikes double what it was before the alert came. So 38 minutes later, people get the all clear. What do they do for either celebration or to find comfort after that anxiety? To what do they turn? They turn to porn. Now, I'm saying this with sort of a smile on my face. Please don't misunderstand. I'm broken over this. This is devastating our world, our country. It's certainly devastating the church because we're not treating it as seriously as we should. We're not protecting our children from it as we should. We're not protecting ourselves from it. We're not willing to get honest with each other and to go to brothers in Christ and say, man, I struggle with this. I hate it. I don't want to. I need you to hold me accountable. I need to do some things to build into my life a protection because I'm weak. You know, we're trying to keep up the facade of, oh, I'm a good Christian. Again, I believe you're a good Christian. I believe you love Jesus. But I'm telling you, this is an insidious, nefarious, destructive tool of Satan, and you can't fight it by just pretending there's not a problem. And I just want to urge you, you're going to have to get really serious with it. And in a few minutes, Scott's going to come. He's going to tell you some things that you can do, some ways that you can build protections into your life. But the bottom line, what I'm trying to convince you is, first of all, you've got to admit there's a problem. You've got to admit there's a danger. And wives, let me just say, if your husband comes to you and says, I struggle with this, I'm going to ask you to forego the getting mad at him and being angry with him because he's telling you that he's had a problem with it, and just be gracious and forgiving and say, okay, I thank you for being honest with it. Now let's fight this thing together. Let's defeat this. Let's not let Satan have a foothold in our marriage. And that's hard. Let me say to women, I'm going to sort of, I'm not defending pornography in any way, but let me say, if your husband tells you that he's looking at pornography, I know what you're going to immediately think is somehow it means you're not enough for him. And that somehow it's a reflection on you. Trust me on this. You could be the most beautiful woman in the world, and you could be the most sexually available woman in the world, and your husband would still be attracted to pornography. You need to know that. It's not a matter of, am I getting enough, or is my wife pretty enough, or is she good enough? It's a matter of the depravity of our sinful flesh. And it's a struggle. So if your husband tells you, please forgive me, but I need you to help me, I'm asking you to just let the Lord give you the grace to be forgiving and say, thank you for telling me that. Yes, let's defeat this together. Let's not let Satan destroy our home. I'm also telling you that there are women that are addicted to pornography. Again, when I was young, I used to say things like men are motivated by sight, women by other things. I no longer say that, because I've learned that women have a problem with this too. Again, now with this availability, and I mean, the 50 Shades of Grey phenomenon is a symptom. It's not the cause. It's a symptom of that. The fact that, I mean, we actually had a member of this church put up on our Facebook page how wonderful 50 Shades of Grey was. And I'm so grateful for some of our godly women that went to her and said, hey, do you not see how wrong and destructive that is? This has so infected our culture. And if you're a woman and you have a problem with it, then you need to get some sisters in Christ to come along beside you and tell them, I want to defeat this. But it's going to shape your image of yourself. It is impossible for you to be looking at pornography without objectifying people around you. You know, I mean, if I'm looking at pornography on Saturday night, I come to church on Sunday morning, I'm not going to look at my sisters in Christ like sisters in Christ. I'm going to be looking at them with the grid and the lens of what filled my heart and mind on Saturday night. And man, I don't want to do that. I don't want that to so infect me that I can't have a pure and wholesome love for my sister in Christ. And instead, I'm picturing her without her clothes, or thinking about some act of self-centered sexual gratification. I don't think you want to be that. I don't think you want to do that. I mean, I think we want to have a community of grace here, where we love each other in a wholesome way. We're not having to worry about the way we think about a brother or sister in Christ, the way we treat them. I think we want to have respect and joy and love. I think we want our marriages to be satisfying. And I'm telling you, one of Satan's greatest tools that he's ever unleashed is pornography. And so let me say, first of all, you need to deal with it on the level of your participation and your attraction to it. And you need to do whatever you need to do. Jesus said, get radical, didn't he? Get radical. So if you need to get rid of your smartphone and go back to a flip phone, then you do that. You do whatever you need to do to build into your life the kind of holiness that God wants you to have. He's given you his Holy Spirit. In the service this morning, I want to tell you, I think the way that God delivers us from sin through the knowledge of what he's done in Christ for us, but you've got to have that desire. So deal with it on your level first. You can't be asking your teenagers to do something that or to not do something that you yourself are engaging in. And furthermore, I'm convinced, I don't mean to be overly mystical about this, but I am convinced that there's a certain level of demonic activity that goes with this, and that when we open our hearts and our homes to pornography, I think it's just like saying, hey, you demons, come on in here and trouble us. I really believe it's an invitation to forces of darkness to come into our homes. You can't have a dad who's looking at pornography be a priest of his family, a shepherd of the hearts of his wife and children. It just can't happen. So I'm asking you to deal with it on your level first and primarily, but I'm also telling you got to deal with it with your kids. You need to have honest conversations with them, and you need to get rid of this notion that your kids are entitled to privacy in your home. That goes against everything the world's telling you, but look, I'm telling you, the world ain't going to be there to help you pick up the pieces. You're going to come running to me and Scott and Chris and pastors and say, oh, this horrible thing has happened in our family. We found out our child is doing such and such. The world, the world's telling you, oh, you got to respect their privacy and all that. But I'm telling you, that's not going to get you where you want to be. About a few years ago, I stood in the pulpit at the old building, and I said this. I said, parents, you need to be looking at your kids' phone. You need to see who they're texting. You need to see what they're looking at. And that very afternoon, parents in our church who had not done that took their child's cell phone and found out that their child was being sexually abused by an older adult. And that older adult had used pornography as a gateway to groom that child. Now, that's just a horrible story. But if there's anything that justifies what I'm telling you, it's that story. I know you want to assume your kid doesn't look at that, but I'm telling you, your child is in this world, and this world is throwing everything they can at your child to get them interested. And we actually have, I'm not making this up, we have students who come here to Buck Run who tell us, I've sort of put out a plea of help to my parents, and they're just like in denial that this is a problem for me. I mean, and we've had students come to us and say, I'm mired in this, man. I'm stuck in pornography. I don't want to do this, and it's causing me great problems in my life. And yet their parents are just sort of clueless. So, these are good kids. These are good kids. So I'm telling you, you need to hold your child accountable. You need to have the open, honest conversations. You need to see this thing is much, much bigger than, so if by God's grace you are a person who's never struggled with this, I can understand why you don't see how huge it is. And praise God if you've never struggled with it. Hallelujah. But don't think everybody else is there. Your child's exposure to pornography is going to have effects far beyond your home. It's going to affect your future son-in-law, daughter-in-law. It's going to affect your future grandchildren. I think this about seminary students. I go, how are these guys going to shepherd the Lord's church if their own marriage is not going to model an intimacy for their people to follow? I honestly believe one of probably the largest source of credibility I have in this church is my relationship with Tanya. And I can't imagine if Tanya and I were cold and distant and you didn't see any intimacy between us, I just think it would compromise my leadership. And yet I fear we've got a whole generation of young pastors coming up, and that's exactly the shape they're going to be in. There's not going to be intimacy between them and their wives. I'll recommend another book to you. It's not a Christian book, and it's brutal. I'm warning you. It's brutal. It's called American Hookup. And it's written by a college sociology professor, and she writes about this hookup culture and the way that now kids' relationships are so shaped by pornography. And she describes the way like at a college dance. So a kid leaves home, goes away to college, lives freshman year. They go to a dance with their friends, And she describes the way they go out on the dance floor, and it's about who they're going to hook up with. And they decide who they're going to hook up with by the reaction of their friends. So as they go out there on the dance floor, sort of grinding up against the guy, doing basically what amounts to simulation of sex on the dance floor, she's looking at her friends' eyes to see whether or not they approve of him. I mean, it's sort of the Instagram, Facebook-like thing taken into real life. Are they hitting the like button for this guy? And if they approve of him, then she'll hook up with him that night. And this sociologist talks about how the intimacy is lost. So you don't have sex with a guy you like. You have sex with the one night stand guy because you're not interested in him. See, here's the thing. Sex they know all about. They've been watching it for years on the internet. They know all the sex acts and stuff that they can do. What they don't know is intimacy. To them, intimacy looks creepy. It's embarrassing. And so holding hands with a guy, just sort of a sweetness between them, that's almost non-existent with this generation. And again, this isn't a Christian book, and if it weren't so tragic, it would be funny, because she tries to grapple with how you tell young people not to do that when she's never willing to say it's wrong. So how do you do that outside of a moral framework? And so basically what she says is, and she talks about the way the college students that she teaches and that she works with will tell her ultimately that they feel abused and used in these relationships. It's not a good thing. They feel shattered by it. And so her conclusion is, okay, if you really genuinely like that, that's okay. But if you don't really like it, don't do it just because your friends are watching. Well, some morality, some conclusion that is, huh? But you and I know there's got to be more to it than that. We know there's a right and a wrong. And we don't want, I don't want my children or my grandchildren or our kids here at church growing up not knowing what intimacy looks like, only knowing what sex is. And what we've done is our culture has totally separated sex from love and marriage and commitment, and here's the important word for us, covenant. A covenantal view. And it's just going to have huge ramifications for our future. So I'm pleading with you. I'm begging you. You need to educate yourself, and you need to do so carefully in such a way that it does not draw you into it. I think watching that TED Talk video, reading the New York Times article, maybe reading the American Hookup book, again, it's rough. I'm just warning you. This stuff is hard to read. But I'm trying to convince you that there's a real issue, because we just have too many of our parents, and we hear it from the kids as well as from the parents, who are going, my kid's different. My kid he's not attracted to that stuff. She would never do that. I'm just telling you, as a pastor, we're seeing the exact opposite of that. We're seeing how this is shaping a whole generation of kids. We're dealing with stuff here at the church with young people now that when I was a youth pastor in the 80s, I didn't even dream of. Just didn't think. It was just unthinkable. It was unthinkable. And yet it's happening right here to good kids in wonderful homes. I'm pleading with you. You're going to have to get in their lives. You're going to have to talk honestly, candidly, openly, uncomfortably with them, and help them to pursue Christ in this. Scott, I'm going to ask you to come, and he's just going to give you some practical things that you can do about internet access, accountability for yourselves and for your kids. Thank you for allowing me to be so candid with you and listening so carefully. Thank you, brother.
Thanks, Dr. York, and thank y'all for being here. Sorry, I forgot to put this on airplane mode, so you're seeing my dad call me. Because I called him, so he's in parent mode. You got to make contact. Hey, thanks for being here. I'm grateful that we can have these conversations together. Sometimes they are hard conversations, but thanks for being here. It's funny, last night I sent that text, hopefully you got it, to come, and immediately it was like, hey, I'm not going to be there. Are you resigning? That's not what this meeting was about. No, I'm here. I really am here, and Catherine and I are just invested in our students, and this is part of that. This is a really big issue. And one of the reasons we had Dr. York come is because I know you're going to listen to him even more than me, that many of your students are struggling with this. And unfortunately, you don't realize it or understand it until it finally comes out. And your students are really good, and they're much more technologically savvy than most of you are. So it takes a long time. And the reason that we invited kids' families, some of you have real little ones. A lot of times we don't learn ahead of time. It's like, oh, I'll learn about that when I get there. I'll figure out the teenage years when they're teenagers. Most of your kids have access to devices at a much younger level, even if it's just you handing them an iPad to be quiet for a few minutes. So they're growing in that quickly. But then when you're in it, you're like, well, I'm already in it. There's nothing I could do. You almost lose hope. If you're in it, if you've got a senior in high school or a college student, we can still have, there's some good stuff here and some practical steps that you can take to help protect or even find out. If your student's struggling with something, if your child's struggling with something, if you're struggling with something, we want to know. Let's get it, bring it to light. Dr. York talked about, he mentioned a time when he mentioned this stuff in the pulpit, and stuff happens. Every time we talk about this in student ministry or in groups of parents, in Sunday school, at community groups, stuff happens. So much so that this week our staff has cleared out time because we have not talked about this and there have not been issues that immediately come to light. Like I will be very surprised if you go home today and I don't get a text from one of you and we start setting up time, like so much so our staff is clearing our schedule because we knew we'd have a big group. That's how real this issue is, and that's how often stuff is coming. But it's more than just a sexual issue, technology. We're not going to go into this, but because your students, even us, I've got 2 devices like in my pocket right here, where you're connected all the time. That changes us a lot. It changes us socially. I see that a lot with our students. They have grown up in a world that just has technology. That's how they interact. Recently talked with some college students that they're struggling in a dating relationship because they don't know how to talk. Like, this is a real issue. And these are 2 of like pride and joy students that we know and care a lot about here. And they're struggling because they don't know how to interact outside of Snapchat. They can't even text. Like, we're so past that. Like, that's our thing. Like, we'll text now. Yeah, we'll even use this. We don't abbreviate everything. But it's a much bigger issue. We're not going to go down that road, but I'm hoping Chris has encouraged us to do this with adult discipleship, and we have these one-shots especially. I want to take advantage and try to do a better job of just equipping you and bringing things to your attention. But just think about how socially your kids are changing. It's hard for me to get kids to go play on Sunday nights at student worship. They want to just sit there and be on their phone. Now, they'll do it in a circle with 8 other people, but they're all on their phone. Right before I came in here, I was over in the student room before Connect. And the whole row of boys, they're just sitting there on their phone. They're not talking to each other, which makes it almost impossible to bring a new student in because they can't interact. But that's what they're growing up in. And seriously, we have college students that are struggling. They're getting counsel like, help us. We want it's a good, godly relationship. All we can do is Snapchat. Like, it's weird. It's hard. Like, it's hard. I noticed that in myself. So that's just another issue. There's so many levels to this. This morning, though, I wanted to let's take a few minutes, let Dr. York hit you with all that stuff, and I just want to go practical on ways that you can, I'm going to use an Apple device, because that's what I have. If you have an Android, there's basically the same system, just called different things. If you have a different device, I encourage you, if you've got smartphones, all of these have it. But I want to help you set up some restrictions, some things to look for. There are different levels of understanding on text. So some of you are already here and you're way past this. That's okay. I'm trying to hit at a level where we can all understand. I'm the youngest guy on staff. I'm the young guy. I graduated before the iPhone was invented. So much is changing, right? Catherine and I last night at midnight are still trying to learn loopholes to things so that we can, after we got back from the Franklin County District game last night, we're trying to find loopholes to help reveal and show those to you. So things change. So if I'm at 29, I'm struggling to keep up with technology. Many of you that aren't involved in tech fields are struggling too. So you're not alone in that. Some of you in the room, though, are great resources for these things. And some of you have much better levels of understanding. But I want to reveal to you just a few things to look at. So one, don't give your kids unlimited access to stuff. What I mean by that is don't just, even if you're going to keep an eye on it or you're checking things, I'm going to show you in a minute how they can get around those things. We have some parents that are like, yeah, but I go through their browser history. Like, that is the easiest thing in the world to delete. You know how to delete that. That's like basic level stuff. Think about these things. Apps. This is a big thing. I'm going to show you in a minute how through Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, you can get into browsers with no search history. It's easy now that I figured out how to do it. Last night at midnight, I was like, man, I wish I had a teenager here. Because anytime I have text problems, I ask one of our students. Because they can just figure it out. Like, my 2-year-old, who we don't let have screen time at all, unless he's at somebody else's house or if he has his tonsils out. Like, this is the only time he gets stuff. Yeah. The iPad came out in the hospital, for sure. He knows how to work an iPhone. And it's because when we go to Memphis and he sees his grandparents, there's pictures all the time. He's like, oh, just swipe. Here's the pictures. Like, he knows the icon. He knows that. He's 2, about to be 3. They're just growing up in a way that we don't think that you unless you really, like, you're in a tech field, don't think that you know more about your stuff than basically your 5 or 6-year-old. They're going to know a lot of stuff. It's not because you're dumb. It's just because that's the world that they're in. So I'm actually going to switch this to my phone and show you some things. So if you have your phone, especially if you have an iPhone, I would encourage you to pull it out at church. It's okay this time. That's a whole other issue with phones. All right, so if you go to settings, general, again, if you got an Android, I don't remember all this stuff. I watched a video on how to do it last night, so it's out there, easy for you to get to. I want to help you begin to restrict and at least control at least what your students have access to. And I want to encourage you to go further than that, but that's ultimately up to you. So right here where it says restrictions, if you go there and you enable restrictions, you have to create a passcode. So don't make this the same passcode as the phone that your students have access to. Don't make it your address, your phone number, your anniversary. Your students are very smart. I could probably crack a lot of your passwords just by looking at your Simple Church profile because all of our passwords are our names and our key dates. All right, so be smart in that. So if I set a password, set it again. Now I can't make any changes to this without that password. So if I go back out and go in, I have to have that password. All right, so this is how, even on your phone, you're controlling anything, and I'll show you what you're controlling. So this is basically, if it's green, it means everything's fine. You're letting it go. So you can control, browser. You can take off Safari. So by doing that, normally, I should have took it out, but at the bottom where those 3 icons are, Safari is usually right there. So I've just removed it from this device. So I've just taken that off. There's not a way, I mean, maybe there's a way, but not a way that, without hacking this phone, that you're gonna get back into that. So you deleted a browser, which I'm gonna give you. You need a browser on your phone, obviously, if you want internet, but I'll show you in a minute what you can do there. So any of your Apple stuff you can take off. Stuff that just comes on your device when you buy your phone is right there. So you can take off camera, Siri, FaceTime, AirDrop, CarPlay. I want to encourage you to control everything on that phone. So block everything. Now, what that does so you don't see like the 60 apps I have on my phone. You don't see all those listed right here. But how you control those is installing and deleting apps. All right? So if I take that off, installing apps, I no longer have the App Store on my phone. So they're not going to control apps. This is a big way in which I'm going to speak about our students. If I reference a student, unless I say otherwise, I'm talking about things that have happened at Buck Run in the last 3 years since I've been here. We have students who are like, yeah, at night, I just download an app, and then I delete it in the morning. Parents never know. All right? If it's a free app, if it's not popping up on your bill, there's ways you can see that. but most of you aren't checking that. All right, that's a real thing that's happening. So if you've given your students a phone, an iPod, tablet, computer, whatever it is, they're equipped to. Let me get back to settings. They're in there. They know how to do that. So if you are going to leave the App Store, at least put it in your password, your fingerprint, not theirs. That kind of thing. If it's a community device, something in your phone, like you need the App Store for your benefit, you could just go in and turn it back on real quick. It's not that hard. But make sure you have the password and not them. If it's their phone, take the App Store off. You can also go in, you can stop them from deleting anything so they can't delete any apps, which doesn't matter as much if they can't install them. But still, I would encourage you to turn all these on. In-app purchases, boss at a former church, his 10-year-old got on there and bought like $300 worth of stuff. So that's a way to fix that general problem, not related to what we're talking about. But when you're handing over in church your iPad and you like leave church every day having to pay offering and app fees, that'll fix that. If you're going to leave these things on, if you're like, I'm not going to take this stuff away. This is a fight with parents. It's a fight with you sometimes, some of you. You're like, they need that freedom. I just trust them, which you can trust your kids and still do this, okay? This is not saying you don't trust your kids. I'm saying they're probably struggling with something. They're doing something they shouldn't. So in that sense, you shouldn't trust them. You just have common sense. But you can, if you go down, you can go in here and regulate levels of content, that kind of things that they can see. So every app, if you go to the App Store, next to the app, it'll say like 4+, so 4-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 17-year-olds, that kind of thing. So you can control levels. I don't think you go there. I think you just take the ability. If they want to go buy an app, it got to come through you. That's the way that you should do that. All right, so I've taken Safari off my phone, which usually is down here. How do I... we'll come back to browser in a second. I want to show you one thing on why it's important that... So if this is my kid's phone, I would delete all these. First of all, they don't need half the stuff that's connected to the church. But I would only put certain things on. I want to encourage you to not let your students have the Facebook app, Twitter, Instagram, any of social media apps. Now, I'm not going to tell you today you shouldn't let them on social media, those kind of things. That's a different day, different discussion. I'll show you how they can access those in a safe way in just a second. There's a reason you should not let them use these apps. Pull up Facebook. So if you search, which I already have, so it's right there. But if you search google.com, on Google's page is a link to Google. So I am still in Facebook. I just follow that link out. And now I've got Google on my phone with no browser history. So it's not, this is why I'm constantly, and some of you I had this conversation with, why it's important that you not just go off of, I check their browser history. Besides the obvious fact that they'll delete it. I've opened Google. I can type anything in here. So like last night, we're trying to figure out the appropriate thing to, I didn't want to like pull up lingerie, those kind of things, right? This was a 5-minute discussion between Catherine and I last night. Like, what could I Google in here that would be like, get the point across, but not be weird? So right there, Scott can now figure out how to get weed, which I just got back from Colorado. So if I wanted it, I would have brought the gummies back yesterday that Buddy Sampson told me about. True story. He's not using them, but he did tell me about them. Right? So understand this, I'm in Facebook, and it doesn't show up on my Facebook search. So if I go back, like right here, normally you could see your history. Like this is my history, and I can delete that. I can delete all that right there. This is different. Just by going to Google's page, going to google.com, I've now accessed a browser, and if everything can be Googled. So now the wide open. You can go to pornography sites this way. You just search for the site, and then you click on the link to the site, and you're in it. Right? It's that easy. You do this again. I'll show you on Instagram. Some friends get engaged there in Grand Canyon. If you search Google, every social media site you can do this. I'm in Instagram, but now I can Google anything. It's the same on Twitter. I don't have a Snapchat account, so I didn't test that, but I saw where it's the same. Right? I looked that up. So it's really important that you take away, if you want to control access, you need to delete all these apps. You can do this through the ESPN app, exact same way. You go down, you click on one of their articles, you scroll down to the bottom, it has a link to ABC. If you click on that, then all of a sudden you're back in the same thing. You can start searching again, right? So most of your apps, if you're going to have an app on the phone, you really need to do your homework, because almost every app goes this way. Not all of them. There's some games, especially those kind of things, that don't have a way to get to a browser, but there's very few apps. So what I encourage you to do is a way to not completely shut off your students. If you're, you giving them a phone, you giving them access, that's up to you. But how you can control this is you download a browser that can be monitored. So almost all of us have heard of Covenant Eyes. And Covenant Eyes have stepped up their game a lot lately, because there used to be all kinds of loop arounds, and there still are a few. But this is, so down here, that little eyeball right there, that's Covenant Eyes. This is now my browser. So you'll see some words. I've been Googling different things, promise. But this is now how I can type in things. So this serves as my browser. And what this does is, if you have Covenant Eyes, it's all monitored. You can control different levels of content. So if you go to just search Covenant Eyes, and you can read through it all. You can say like teen content or kids content, or like obviously take off mature and all those things. It walks you through that. But not only does it block some things, and that you can buy another level of protection that really controls a little bit of stuff. But it gives you reports. So you're going to get a monthly report. So say Warner's 17 and he's got a phone, I would get his report, and I can see through it. And in these reports, it breaks it down by, you can get as detailed as you want and see everything they went to. But it's going to say, hey, this is something you should check out. They went to YouTube and looked at this. Right? YouTube is a really scary app for this. So you should not let your students, you should block YouTube straight up, even if you let them go into a browser. YouTube has everything, and it's getting really loose on its age-based stuff. So what it's going to say is appropriate for a 13-year-old, none of you would think is appropriate. So just an aside there, YouTube's a really rough place for that. But Covenant Eyes is going to say, like, they saw this much mature content, or they tried to go to this site and we wouldn't let them. It's going to give you all that information. That's an easy way. You could spend all your time going through and reading that every day, and there's seasons of life if your kid's struggling with things that you should be daily involved in this. But this is a practical way where you can set the right restrictions. You can set up your iPad or phone or Android device, funnel everything through Covenant Eyes. They can still go to Twitter, Facebook. They can still access those social media accounts if you want them to have that through the browser. Now, there are some devices that monitor different apps. So something called Circle, it's by Disney. If you look up, Google, it's meetcircle.com. They have a couple different options. One of those is Circle Go. You can download on your phone, and it tracks what your kids look at. It doesn't, though, however, get into the weeds and really stop them from doing much, and it doesn't record everything that they're seeing. So if you go into Facebook, like I just showed you, and you start running, they start running through searches and things, it's not going to record that level, but it does help you see what they're looking at to a degree. The best way is to limit basically everything on the phone and make everything go through. I'm saying Covenant Eyes. There's 100 of these. You can search and figure out which one you want. Covenant Eyes is great if you just want to go with a blanket recommendation. So that's that's kind of the first steps you should take. I want to encourage you to think about your phone access or internet access with your kids and students as like a reverse funnel. So some of you have a 17-year-old, and to think that you're going to restrict them all the way down to nothing, you're probably not going to take that step, right? But for some of you that are just getting into that game, or in the next couple of years are going to get to, teach them like everything else. Let's parent them. Let's give them a little bit at a time and teach them how to use it well. It's going to help you as you're growing and how to monitor stuff, but it's going to help them teach the right things. Don't just say, I got you an iPhone for Christmas or your birthday. Here you go. Don't do anything bad. Like, you just set your kid up to fail. And many of us have done that, and that's okay. So this morning we're not wanting this to be a shame on you time. We want to be like, this is where we are, and let's get better. So let's figure out the steps that you need to take for your family. So if you're going to hand your kids' birthdays this month and you're going to get them a phone, just give them a little bit of access. No apps. Just start with just the browser, get Covenant Eyes, and they just learn to do stuff. Apps are obviously made for a reason. They're super convenient. They're easy. They sync things really well. That's why my phone's full of them. Anything I put on my computer is on my phone. It's on my tablet. Like, I can get all my stuff all the time, all because of apps. It's really nice. I would never give a teenager the same level of access to things, let alone a younger one that's just learning how to use it. So as they grow and they earn the right to get more things, so they earn the right to get maybe an app on their phone, Twitter, those kind of things. Ultimately, they can. What I'm saying is you don't even have to take away anything from them. They'll think it because you've just taken away apps off their phone. But if you funnel everything through Covenant Eyes, it's a little more complicated. You got to search for stuff. You got to log in. It takes away the ease of an app that's already logged in and those kind of things, which you can still save your password and log in stuff in Covenant Eyes. So it's not like you're having to log in every time. But it is a little more complicated. It's not the 3 seconds I can be anywhere on my phone kind of thing. But that's a good step to take, and begin to do that with especially your young ones that are just getting phones, and then give them more rights and privileges, and obviously take them away when it needs to be done. So setup-wise, that's, again, if you go, I'll show you one more time. Go into restrictions. Oh, it's on my iPad. General. So settings, general, restrictions. And then, again, you can just turn this stuff off. So this takes all this off my phone. Like, FaceTime's not on my phone now. Camera's not on my phone. It's all gone. iTunes Store. This is where people are like, oh, I'll leave that. So iTunes does not they're pretty good about not putting videos on there that you wouldn't want. There's a lot of audio stuff that you wouldn't want them listening to either. Don't just think of this issue as going to a pornography website. That is a very old school way of thinking about this. There's Instagram accounts that can be followed that is just as explicit as anything that you're going to see, not just as, but enough, more than you want your kid to see. That's through all of your different systems. Honestly, if you, on ESPN, there's ads that pop up that I wish didn't, right? So that stuff's going to be there. Just the things we watch on ABC at 8 o'clock at night is going to be explicit enough, more than what any of us should be looking at. But we become more comfortable with watching those things, and then all of a sudden your students are watching it with you, and that kind of thing. There's a lot to this, but this is a great way to start with your phone and your devices, those restrictions. And I'm happy to help you with this. Last time we had one of these conversations, somebody's like, I never talked to you because I knew a lot of other people were. It's my job. It's what I want to do. Yeah, Laura, what?
I'm sorry for jumping ahead. Are you familiar with parental apps that you can put on your phone that give you real time? I have a friend who has a teenage son. She has an app, and it shows her every text her son gets when he texts.
Yes, so I don't have, and you may have one that you want to recommend. So I was recommended one called Phone Sheriff, but don't write it down because it just got shut down. And then, so just like the last month, it got killed. So there's others. If you look up Phone Sheriff, you'll immediately see replacements. There's folks around you that are doing this really well, that you can ask different things. And if you ask me that, if you know one, this can open lines of communication. Before I forget, on the back table is check-in. We want to know if you're here. We're going to send an email out with lots of resources. A couple of those things that Dr. York just mentioned are pretty explicit. So if you don't want that, just scratch your name off or don't put your name down. But it's not like, it's just, you can handle it. We wouldn't send you anything that isn't appropriate. But
screen time.
Okay, screen time.
It's a monthly fee, but
Yeah.
shut it off at any time.
Yeah. I know some of y'all got to go. That's great. I'm going to go 5 more minutes for the rest of us. So Covenant Eyes does cost. And I've had a family tell me before, I want something that's free. I don't want to pay for this. And there are some free things, but you get what you pay for. And if you're going to pay a few $100s for a phone, and you're going to pay hundreds of dollars for a plan, then you've just got to budget or not do it to get some accountability software. You got to take that step. If you're going to go into this game, if you're going to jump into this pool, you got to swim with the right stuff. $16 a month, Covenant Eyes will cover your whole family. It's $11.99 for an individual. But you, your spouse, all your kids can all be on there for that amount. From a parenting aspect, what I want to encourage you is don't raise the bar higher than what you're setting it yourself. And that doesn't mean lower the bar, but that means that you need to have the same software. You need to have the same restrictions, reasonably, obviously. So if you're, I'm just telling you, it's going to be a big shift for your kids if you take their apps off and run everything through Covenant Eyes. Say that mom and dad are going to do this with you too, because that's how serious. And we know that we are, you may be struggling now, but you can say that we know that we are not above struggling with this too. But pornography is not just the issue, and it's not just a male issue. So 4 out of every 5 guys, and I believe this is a nationwide stat. I think it's true for our student ministry. Look at pornography. 1 out of 7 girls do, and I'm telling you, I think it's a little higher here. Our girls are looking at that. And that's always, people with daughters usually shut off when pornography starts getting talked about. Don't. It's growing. Our students are great. I love our students. I think we have one of the most mature student ministries, like just some incredible godly young men and women, and they struggle with it. You have some incredible students and kids, and they're struggling with it. This is not like your kid's bad. Like, no, all of our students are into something here. It's never a surprise when it comes up. And there's not just pornography. Getting online, again, we don't have time to talk about all this stuff, can lead to some gender confusion things. The LGBTQ community is alive and well on the internet, and they are going after people, and they have a way to identify people, and they're pulling people in, and we are struggling with that here. There's just so many levels of this stuff. We can't talk about that, but realize this is an issue on socially, sexually, sexual identity. These issues are real. You need to take this serious. You need to take some steps. You and your spouse need to spend some time over the next few days and talk about what that looks like for you all and for your family. You need to help with this, whatever those steps are. Take some action steps. I'm available to talk about those things. I'm available to kick you to some people that are here that know more than I do. Our staff is available if you need to talk, if you've got students that need to talk. When your student comes to you, don't get angry. It's like he's talked about with wives. If your husband comes to you, celebrate that they came to you. Love on them for that. That is a win. That is a good thing. Obviously what they're doing is not a good thing, and we'll walk through that. You can walk through that. We'll come alongside you if you want us to. There's a couple resources. We just kind of threw this together at the last minute. So this isn't at the Resource Center yet, but finally free. It'll be here next Sunday. It addresses pornography for men and women. So it's a good one. Sexual Detox by Tim Challies is a good one. I'll email you all these. But it's just addressed to men. Not that there's not good principles, but it's for men. Raising teens in a hypersexualized world is good. It's at the Resource Center. I'll email you stuff on Circle, on Covenant Eyes, those articles that Dr. York mentioned. If you have questions, I'll be around all the time, so I'm here. But I'll hang around right after this specifically. But I just want to really encourage you to have this conversation. Get away from your kids this afternoon, tomorrow, really soon, marriage retreat. I'm going to drive down and have that conversation. And then what are your steps that you're going to take? Some of you are going to go all in and be really restricted. Some of you are going to say like, I don't want to go that far. And that's up to you, but you need to take steps. And you need to have these conversations. Approach this right. Don't make this sound like we're taking things away from our kids or students. Again, that's why it's important to show that you're doing it too. But tell them why. Go through the why. It's not because I hate you or don't trust you. It's because I want to protect you. I love you. I care for you. The Bible says we should avoid immorality. The Bible also tells us that Satan is going to come after us in every way. I would never, and you would never put a 15-year-old boy and 15-year-old girl at camp. We would not let them have a room to themselves and expect that nothing would happen. Right? We put things in place, this super obvious boundaries, those kind of things. We are not taking those super obvious boundaries on our phones, on our computers. A lot of it's because we just aren't familiar with it. We did not talk about PlayStations, Xboxes. We didn't really talk much about computers. PlayStations and Xboxes have the same way as like those apps of getting onto browsers. We can maybe continue this conversation in the future, but you can look that stuff up. So any form of tech, just trust me, there's ways to get on it. Not on March 18th, so 2 Sundays from now, we have a Christ-centered parenting class that I believe is in one of these rooms. This one, thanks. It's a 6-week class. It's going to be led by Todd Hutcherson. It's a video-based curriculum, and every week just going through a different issue with parenting, and technology is going to be one of those. So that'll be a time where we'll have discussion on that, and Todd uses Circle, I believe, at their house, and can help you talk through those things. So you're dismissed. I'm here if you want to talk, but please reach out this week if you've got questions for us, or we can help you.